Hello, and welcome back to Let's Get Lit. In today's episode, we're going to be going over Part 3, Chapter 4 of George Orwell's classic, 1984. The last episode was pretty heavy with torture, and I think we're about to be into another chapter of that. This is a really hard part to get through. Stomach with me as we continue to go on and see what's happening with Winston and all of the various tortures he's going through caused by O'Brien. Shall we? This chapter starts off with Winston telling the reader that he was much better now. He was growing fatter and stronger every day, if he were truly counting day by day. He goes on to state that he is back in a white cell, but this one's a little comfier than the one he was starting out in. There was a pillow and a mattress on a plank bed, and a stool to sit on. They gave him a bath, and they let him wash himself fairly frequently in a basin and a tin. They even gave him warm water to wash himself with. They gave him underclothes and a clean suit of overalls. They addressed his wounds and soothing ointments, and they pulled out the remainings of his teeth and gave him a new set of dentures. He goes on to say that it was weeks or even months that must have passed by, and it would have been possible to keep track because they were now feeding him at regular intervals. They were feeding him 3 times a day, and every third meal they gave him a little bit of meat. Once there was even a packet of cigarettes, and though it made him sick to begin smoking again, he persevered and kept going. They didn't give him any matches to light his cigarettes with, but the guard who delivered his food would often have a light so that way he could light Winston's cigarette for him. He goes on to say that really in between meals he didn't do anything. He mainly just sleeps. He's gotten used to the bright light shining in his face as he's sleeping, which Winston says actually makes it easier for his dreams to be coherent and to remember them. He states that really everything he thinks about while he's awake are just dreams that he's had previously. He would understand that this really isn't a bad thing and that he wasn't bored because he was alone. And he wasn't beaten or questioned. He had enough to eat, and he was clean all over, which was completely satisfying. Winston says that sooner or later he spent less time asleep and was watching himself grow with all of his meals. Not only growth in strength, but also in body. At one point, when Winston's thighs becomes bigger than his knees, he decides it's time for him to start exercising again. It starts off with small things, where he walks about 3 kilometers in his jail cell every day. He then tests the limits of what he can fully do, which is not much. He's not able to hold the stool out at his arms at full extent. He's not able to do a full squat, and he's not able to do a push-up. However, as he's gaining his strength back, he keeps at it every day, and soon he's able to do all of these things with ease, because each meal is strengthening him up. Once he physically is able to control his body, he goes over to a small slate that's in the room with the pencil and decides it's time to re-educate himself. In his mind, he knew that for the past 7 years, the party was watching him like a beetle under a magnifying glass. He knew there were no physical acts or words spoken aloud that they had not noticed, no train of thought they had not been able to infer, and even the white dust on the cover of his diary had carefully been replaced. They showed him photographs and played him tracks of things that he had said or did, and he knew he could not fight against the party any longer. He even tells the reader that he agrees that the party is right, and it must be so because how could the immortal collective brain be mistaken? In his hands with the pencil, he clumsily writes, "Freedom is slavery," and beneath that, 2 + 2 makes 5. He knew there was something else he wanted to write, but he couldn't quite think of it. And then all of a sudden, as if his own accord, he wrote, "God is power." He tells the reader that he accepts that everything in the past is alterable, and the past had never been altered. Oceania was at war with East Asia. Oceania had always been at war with East Asia. That the 3 men who were guilty of their crimes that they were charged with, he had never seen. He had never seen the photograph to prove their guilt. He tells the reader that he invented all of this inside of his head. It was all products of self-deception. He states, only surrender and everything else follows. He tells the reader it's like swimming against the current of an ocean, and that it's easier to turn around and swim with the current. As the reader continues to read, Winston tells the reader that he is training himself in the art of doublethink and of Crime Stop. He also tells the reader how it takes a lot of great effort to do this. He does this and says stupidity is as important as intelligence. He goes on to tell the reader that he wonders when they're going to shoot him, and what O'Brien had said to him comes back to him, and that everything depends on yourself. He wondered what his future might hold for him, and what exactly they were doing to him once they let him go, if they let him go. One night he begins to dream, and he dreams about walking down a road in the Golden Country, and he states that he felt fantastic and full of strength, and he noticed everything around him completely beautiful. This springy turf under his feet, the gentle sunshine on his face, and the rabbit-cropped pasture, and beyond that the stream where the dace lay in green golden pools under the willows. In his dreams, before he could even think that he cries about Julia for his love, for a moment he had an overwhelming hallucination of her presence, and he could feel the the love that she had for him and the love that he had for her, and that they were together and free. He knew that somewhere or other she was still alive and needed his help. He then lays back on his bed and tries to compose himself. The thought then hits him of what he's just done and how his inner voice has sabotaged him again. After all of his hard work and after all that was undone by a single foolish cry for Julia. He then goes back to thinking about the bullet and when they're going to inevitably shoot him. At the end of his entire train of thought about shooting him and when it's going to happen, he then states to die hating them. That was freedom. He shut his eyes and he knew it was more difficult to accept that in its intellectual discipline. At this moment of thinking, he hears heavy, thick footsteps coming from down the corridor. The steel door swings open and O'Brien walks into his cell. O'Brien tells him to get up and come over here, to which Winston does and stands opposite of him. O'Brien states that you've had thoughts of deceiving me. That was stupid. Stand up straight. Look me in the face. O'Brien tells him, you're improving. Intellectually, there's very little wrong with you. It's only emotionally that you have failed to make progress. Tell me, Winston, and remember, no lies. You know that I'm always able to detect a lie. Tell me, what are your true feelings towards Big Brother? Winston responds, I hate him. O'Brien states, you hate him. Good. It's now time for you to take your last step. You must love Big Brother. It's not enough to obey him. You must love him. O'Brien releases Winston with a push towards the guard and states, Room 101. This is where Part 3, Chapter 4 ends. Join us next time as we figure out what exactly is in Room 101. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, stay lit.